Yeah, so a very warm welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us for our next webinar on exploring social pedagogical concepts during turbulent times, which we are hosting together with the Social Pedagogy Association, which is based in the UK, of which Cara is a representative, and also together with the Social Pedagogy Professional Association, which is based in the UK, and which is represented by Robin Kemp, who chairs the SPPA. So it's a collective effort to try and obviously make sure that we have as much collective input and impact on the development of social pedagogy across the globe, really, certainly in the English-speaking world, as we can possibly have. Because obviously we want to promote the things we're really passionate about. And we thought that this webinar series would be a good place to discuss theory and how it relates to practice. And one of the key important things in social pedagogy is very much that theory is closely connected and is coherent with practice. So this gives us an opportunity to ensure that there is coherence between the concepts we talk about on our courses and in publications, etc. And also to make sure that practice is guided by theory and theoretically informed. To cover this today, we have obviously the chance to focus on the diamond model today and how can we ensure that our practice is grounded in a positive idea of human nature. So I'm very pleased to welcome into the fishbowl, so to speak, Lois Scharf from the University of Central Lancashire and Robin Kemp from the Social Pedagogy Professional Association and Cara O'Neill from the Social Pedagogy Association. The way we're gonna run the webinar is basically I'll briefly outline what the diamond model is about, or the underpinning idea of it. We will then basically start with a fishbowl discussion. So we'll hear from Robin and from Cara and from Lois about their experiences and how that relates to the diamond model. And then we'll have an opportunity to explore this a bit more widely with everyone and to draw out some of the key learning points for us all and in terms of what's the relevance for practice. Does that sound okay with people? Perfect. So let me start then with regards to the diamond model. So we developed the model back in, I think, 2009 or so, as a way to articulate what social pedagogy is about, what it aims to achieve, and what kind of perspective it seeks to promote. In doing so, I think we try to express the underlying idea of human nature that we seek to promote in social pedagogy, and the fact that we try to look for diamonds. In effect, we look for what makes people rich, unique, resourceful, and what ultimately enables people to contribute to society, and to have a positive, happy, enriching life. So it's a bit of well, yeah, it is what it is, the metaphor. I think it's been inspiring for lots of people because it promotes a very different idea and concept of children, young people, but also disadvantaged adults more generally, than we tend to have in education or in social care, where all too often we can focus on the deficits or the needs and what holds people back, and less so on the things that they have within them or within their community, within their social network, that can enable them to live a meaningful life, whatever that might mean for themselves. And we found that the diamond model in particular kind of is also something that right now, during this pandemic, is an important thing to keep in mind, that people are rich, that we are going through difficult, turbulent, upsetting times. but actually it's important that we also look for the good in people, that we look for examples of where people come together, where people support each other, and that we kind of provide a counter narrative to this idea that everybody's in it for themselves, and that we need to, make sure that we're competing for scarce resources with other people. That's not what we seek to promote in social pedagogy. Just to super briefly outline the core aims, then these are about well-being and happiness in a holistic sense, about holistic learning and providing opportunities for people to learn, providing opportunities for people to thrive, and doing so through relationships, both with us as professionals, but also for people to be in relationships and have meaningful relationships throughout their entire lives. With the people that are important to them, that are part of their community. And of course, it's about making sure that people feel in control, that they feel they have the power to change the world, the power to lead a meaningful life, the power to make a positive difference in the community that they are part of. So it's very much about looking for ways in which we can support people in feeling more empowered, and doing so through creating positive experiences. Now, I could probably go on for a very, very long time about the diamond model and all of those areas. And if you are interested, we're doing an 18-hour experiential online course, which will cover all of that in a lot more detail. I think for the purpose of this webinar today, we wanted to really focus on this notion of the diamond and the importance of actually looking for what makes people rich, what makes people able to contribute, and to, what can we do to help them recognize the uniqueness and the resourcefulness that they have, and what can we do to create the conditions that help people draw that out. And it reminded us a lot of this Cherokee Parable, which you might know about the two wolves that are inside of everybody. One is representing the good in us, and one is representing the evil in us, and they are in a constant fight with each other. So the parable is here if you're not familiar with it, and it is all about kind of recognizing that we can't kind of have a black and white image of the world, of some people are good and some people are bad, but we need to understand what is going on inside of us in terms of how do we articulate that, and how can we make sure that we create an environment where people feel like it's important that we feel that we feed the good wolf within us, and where we don't have that environment, which I think we all too often have, that we're told that actually you need to feed the bad wolf, you need to look after yourself, you need to make sure that you are in the best position to compete for scarce resources, and all of that. So it's all about the environment that we, through our social pedagogical work, whether that's in early years or in residential care or in any other setting where we work with people, what kind of environment do we create so that people recognize and have lots of opportunities to feed the good wolf, to use that parable, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think one example that can highlight that a little bit more in terms of what that looks like in practice is a project that Robin has been very closely involved in and has actually led. So I'll be curious to hear a bit more about your work, Robin.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I have now left Hackney, but while I was there, I was managing a project called the Family Learning Intervention program even, and it is very much about feeding the right wolf. The families that were referred to us had basically, they were either at risk of a child coming into care, or at risk of the child who was in care for that placement to be breaking down. So what the project did is work with the family to work on what they would like to change, but also what are the most importantly, what are the things that they want to do more of in the family? What are the things that are working well? When most of us find that when things are going badly, we focus our attention on the bad stuff. So we try and change the behavior of a child, for example. We try and focus all the attention on the problems in the family. And as a social worker and somebody who's been involved in this for several decades, that is the kind of deficit focused approach of social care. So Flip was trying to do something really radically different. And the success is on actually really trying to see the diamond in everybody, especially in the child who has been characterized as being the problem. So one of the important parts of Flip is informed by systemic family therapy. And that's the notion that the problems lie in the communication between people, not in a particular person. So that really relates very well to the diamond model. And when things are going difficultly, or when they're going badly, it's really difficult to see the diamond in people, which is why this model is so helpful, because it focuses our attention away from the feelings that we're having of this is really too difficult, and it can help us to find solutions and to grow the good stuff that will then be able to contain the bits of difficulty that we all experience in life. So it's very much about well-being and happiness, and that being intrinsically linked to how we learn. And we talk about holistic informal learning, not the formal kind. And the empowerment and relationship parts are also incredibly intrinsically interlinked. And often with teenage children, it's partly because this is part of the difficulty, is that children want to be empowered to be able to go off and do their own thing. That has an impact on the relationship with the parents, and things can break down. So actually, when we really talk about how we can feed more participation in how the family work together on the good things. It's a very fine project. It's now being led by Nazanin Ali, and the operations manager is now someone called Regitze Julholt, who is a social pedagogue from Denmark, and who was one of the team of social pedagogues that we had in its last iteration. It's now sort of developing. It's moving on to a kind of slightly different way of working, but very much at its core is the sense that we need to polish up this diamond in the family, so taking a whole family approach and really not focusing on one problematic person within that.
Thanks, Robin. I'm curious. So, how did the families then respond? Like in practical terms, was it a shock to encounter something like Flip, or was it?
Absolutely. We do a lot of preparation with families, so we show them pictures and videos of.
And she mentioned that she would have a bit of an issue with her internet connection. So
where they're going. It's a beautiful big house. Oh dear, is my connection going?
Yeah, keep
my
going.
Connection is. Sorry, chaps.
You were going to show them pictures of, or you would show them.
Yeah, so we show them pictures of where they're going, but when they get there, it's really quite a shock for some families, and because.
Okay, it's a beautiful house, as far as I know, and I think they're probably families that are not used to that kind of environment, or being.
They're not used to. Yeah, I'm sorry, my internet is very unstable.
No worries, no worries. I'm just kind of complimenting what you're saying, and then you chip in saying exactly what I was saying. So that's quite funny. Yeah, so I think
Yeah,
there's something about the actual environment representing that belief in the diamond model as well, and showing families that we don't just give them a crap place to stay because we can't be bothered, we don't really care about you, but actually showing that we think you have that potential to transform your relationships.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we use nature. A lot of families don't get an opportunity to explore nature a lot, and that for a lot of people they found very calming and found ways of then transferring that learning into how they might change things at home in Hackney. Um, we use creative arts, we use sports and physical activities. We have a very detailed schedule that is agreed with the family and the professional network. One of the key things is that the social worker comes and stays for the week. So this is the aim is to also.
Yeah, I think there is something about also the social work is kind of being part of that transformation process and getting a chance to see the diamond, and vice versa, I think as well, that the family has a chance to see more than just the professional social worker that they would normally meet. So I think it's a fantastic example of what the diamond model can look like in practice, and just what profound difference it does make on the people
Strengthen
that.
the relationship.
So I will go on then and hand over to Kara to pick things up from there, and hopefully Robin's internet connection will improve again, and she can yeah, continue the fishbowl conversation in a little while. Kara, over to you. Thanks, Robin.
So I think I was listening to Robin as we could, but I'm really fascinated. I am not familiar with her program or her house or any of this project that she's done. But this idea of whole family approach really kind of tied into what I wanted to share myself about an experience that I had with a group home called Abilities. It's in the United States. And this is where I shock you all and tell you how horrible group homes can be in the US, which we have a reputation. But when in the state, in Missouri, when you are placed into a group home or you chose to go into a group home, residential care is kind of the same. One of the things that happens is you are sent with a sort of a dossier or a file of your faults. So this is not a file of the good things. This is a file of all of the reasons that you need to be in residential care, whether it is a physical disability or an issue with behaviors, or if maybe your family life, but whatever these pile of problems, I have to say, that goes directly to your residential care facility. And that's the first impression that anybody that's going to be working with you gets. So as a residential care worker, when I'm now working in this facility, the first thing I receive of any child or adult that's come into this facility is this folder from the state, which now tells me everything that's wrong with this person. And there are no punches pulled on this dossier. I mean, and there's very little positive. So it's immediately difficult as a residential care worker to see people, because you've already got this list of, well, this is, a major behavioral problem. So I want to go back a few years in my experience and kind of talk about this young woman. She was 16 that I had. She had a range of different disabilities, from congenital disabilities to some behavioral issues. All of these issues kind of rolled together into this dossier, and we got her with words from her social worker that she would, and I quote, be a problem no matter what you do. And lucky for me, the residential home I worked at was wonderful. They didn't call it the diamond model. We didn't have the diamond model. We didn't know what it was. But they absolutely thought, okay, first thing we need to do is find what's good here. Number one, and this was sort of the training that I received. Now, being in the US and being background in behavioral psych, we immediately went to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when you start looking at that, you begin to look at what are the physiological, what are the safety needs, what do we need to do as far as self-esteem. How do we reach this idea of self-actualization? And as I've come to study the diamond model more, I begin to see that this diamond in the diamond model really is sitting, and we've got this triangle in Maslow's hierarchy. This diamond is just sitting right here in the middle. We're not waiting to reach this peak of self-actualization, which I think is how that model was written forever ago. But I think that if we can reach in and find this diamond, that's where we reach our empowerment and we start to find the diamond of the person. This goes into holistic learning, or is led by holistic learning, I suppose, because what we need to do is we need to set the dossier aside, whether it's an actual US dossier or just in our brains something somebody has told us, rumors that we've heard. We need to take this dossier and set this aside. So what we did with this young woman was at the time, my boss actually took her dossier away from us. I was the only one that had seen it. None of the other workers in this residential home saw this dossier. She locked it in a drawer. Again, I was the only one with the key, so nobody else that worked with us had it. And she said, I want 15 minutes of every day. I want every one of you to sit down. This was to all of us that were going to work with this young woman, to sit down and tell me 5 things that you enjoyed during the day about this young woman. And we went from a young woman who in the first week was literally trying to find butcher knives to pull on staff, to months down the road, weeks down the road, this young woman would come up and randomly give hugs. She would be telling us how great it was to live there, how she never wanted to leave. And the very, very simple thing that changed was we spent 15 minutes a day finding what we enjoyed in our interactions with her. We built that relationships within ourselves before we could manage to go and build that relationship with this woman. And this is one insulated, experience, but it's one that I wanted to share because I kept bringing to mind when Robin was talking about her family coming together, and instead of focusing on a singular problem, building this whole family approach, we essentially managed the same thing. But I think to find that diamond of a person, we need to be sure that we're finding that in ourselves. And I think that's an important kind of message to go with the diamond model, because we cannot teach holistically or in a formal setting. We cannot, build relationships with people if we can't find the good in someone. So that's my kind of idea of the diamond model in practice.
Thanks. That's really fascinating. It really reminds me of what I hear quite a lot in child and youth care around catching people doing something good. So focusing on the times when they do something that we can actually build on, that we can highlight to them and actually show to them that they have so much in themselves. It also reminds me very much of examples that we've heard in the past about, lots of behaviors only become an issue when we struggle as individuals to kind of express them in a way that would be pro-social, I guess. So I've heard stories from other children's homes about a young person who wanted to become a drug dealer, and it's very easy to kind of initially go like, oh my God, he's gonna end up in prison and all of those things, and to kind of almost, with that dossier in mind that Kara was mentioning, you can almost kind of then write the dossier for the future the way you see it, and kind of say you're predestined to end up in prison and nothing good's ever going to become of you. And of course that has an impact. But I think what they did very much was the opposite. They tried to understand, so what is it that makes him attracted to that career choice as a drug dealer? And it turned out that he wanted to earn a decent amount of money. He didn't want to get up too early in the morning, so being able to lie in and work rather in the evening was an important thing. And he wanted to be independent. He wanted to be able to just kind of make his own decisions. Now, based on kind of his understanding of the world at that time, the most likely route to achieve that was to become a drug dealer. But he had lots of other skills that they could build on, and by just showing him that there's other career choices that might help you create a more positive future where you don't constantly have to run from the police, kind of thing. they managed to find him a career that met all his needs as well, and that enabled him to actually live a much more positive life and make a positive contribution, and still get the things that he wanted for himself. So there's something as well about kind of how we can use the diamond model with people to kind of look forward to what can we do, and how can we kind of help people broaden their horizons and see new opportunities, new ways forward for themselves. Great. So Lois, I'd like to invite you to join the debate as well with a personal experience during lockdown and how the diamond relates to that.
Yeah, so my example is coming from the much more kind of personal aspects. If you think about the 3 Ps, professional and personal, and it links to something that's very close to my heart, which is netball. So I'm part of a walking netball group. So a few years ago I had an injury and I can't play netball anymore, and so luckily my sister and my friend who's a coach set up a walking netball team. So about 3 years we've been running, and so I wanted to talk about the diamond model in relation to this. So the vast majority of women that come to the walking netball are older adults, what would be seen as older adults. So they're retired, and the age limit is kind of 46 to 83. So we've got a real spread of ages. And so when we think about the diamond model, when we think about well-being and happiness, so sorry, before I go on, the positive experience I think is really important. So the bit in the middle for us is this positive experience of coming along, joining in something that is non-competitive. So we're not very competitive and we have lots of fun. We laugh a lot. We're always going on about how our face muscles are working more than any other part of our body because we laugh so much. And this really then links to well-being and happiness. So for us, the walking netball team has meant that this has been a real link back into sports. And for some of these women, and even for me, from a personal perspective, I'm now back involved in a sport that I didn't think I would be able to play. And that's the same for lots of these women. And so that creates a real feeling of happiness. There's also a lot of theory around and research done around sports and well-being as well. So you can see that improved health and fitness happens really quickly. And what surprised us when we started 3 years ago is that after about a month, 2 months, some of the women's cognitive abilities, their thinking abilities, but also their mobility really increased. So they were coming and saying they'd fallen over less, or they felt much more steadier, and they felt more confident. So, you know, just think about well-being and happiness linking to a non-competitive sport has been really interesting. We then move on to relationships. So I'm going to kind of work my way around the diamond. So the relationships have been really kind of fundamental. So what we've found, because it's non-competitive and we have a real laugh, is that we've built some real connections with each other. And so these are women that, apart from obviously the 2 coaches who I know in a personal way, I didn't know any of these women before, and they all live in my local town. I'd never met them, and now I feel a kind of much more sense of connection to them and to the town. And also it's meant that during lockdown, so what's been really interesting is that we've been running for like I say about 3 years, and then lockdown happens, and suddenly these relationships became really important to people because suddenly we couldn't meet up in person. And actually for some of the women, like we had one lady who'd lost her husband. She'd been married 57 years and her husband died towards the end of last year, and she's been on her own. So obviously she's got family, but we've been part of those relationships, part of those connections. So moving on to holistic learning. So coming to the pandemic, what's been really interesting here is that we've very quickly used IT. So because we couldn't meet up, the 2 coaches set up daily tasks for us to do with toilet rolls and socks, which sounds a bit bizarre, but it was to kind of keep us engaged in the netball training, keep us engaged. So we had a WhatsApp group that then moved on to Zoom, and what we set up was a weekly quiz. So instead of meeting on a Wednesday to do training and have a game of netball, we've set up a weekly quiz. And what's been really fascinating is that quite a lot of these women had really struggled with the technology to start with, but within about 2 or 3 weeks they were getting to grips with it, and then they've been able to go and use this to keep in touch with their families, set up quizzes themselves, set up quizzes with their families and their friends. but the holistic learning for me on a personal level, I think has been really positive, because it's really made me challenge my idea of what it is to grow older, what it is to become an older woman, an older adult. And they have given me some really fantastic insights, and particularly, like I said, the lady that lost her husband, thinking about grief and loss, and how actually we've become part of that process of her dealing with that has really made me think about kind of death and loss as well. So then moving on to empowerment, what very quickly happened with the quiz was that we all started to take turns. So even when people didn't feel really confident in kind of doing a Zoom quiz, they've all kind of had a go. So, you know, somebody would say, right, I tell you what, I'll have a go next week, I'll do this quiz. And so we started, I might have helped somebody do a PowerPoint so they could have a PowerPoint up, and then people have just slowly kind of gained those skills and taken them over themselves and become really empowered. And to give you that kind of idea, some of the laughs that we have during the quiz, some of my favourite quizzes have been, we did the generation game. I don't know if everybody remembers the generation game with the conveyor belt. So Christine and her husband had 24 items that they were passing past the computer screen, and then we had a minute to remember what they were. My other favourite was we had a quiz where we had to guess whether it was a cheese or a service station in the UK. You know, we've had name that tune quizzes. So all kinds of different quizzes that have kind of come up, and everybody's kind of taken it in turns and had a go. But this has been really interesting because it meant that it's really increased their confidence and those connections and those relationships with each other. They're learning things, they're feeling much more kind of supported but also connected during lockdown, because for some women this has been quite an isolating time and they've not been able to go out. You know, they might have been shielding because of their age and other you know, impacts, but it's been a really positive experience. And I think this is a really good example of when you've got a positive experience, something that just seems like a weekly get together to do a bit of sport has actually had much more profound and long-term kind of impacts on everybody. The other thing to say as well with regards to empowerment, and then I'll finish, is that towards the back end of last year we got invited to go and join a walking netball competition, and we were all a little bit like, oh God, will we be all right? So we went along, we came second to last, we won one match. But then what we realised when we all came away was that we're not very good, but actually it doesn't matter. And actually what we felt was that we were confident enough to go and have a go at it, and we had good fun, and I think that's the kind of key to it. So that's my experience of the diamond model.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Lois. And I think it shows really nicely that the model can be applied in so many different contexts, and I think what it does, it amplifies the things that actually happen that we sometimes don't necessarily recognize in the moment, and where we might feel like that's trivial, it's just a netball group or something like that. But actually when you look at it more deeply and try to kind of analyze it and unpick it, you see how just one activity each week has such a deep impact, and how all those different aspects kind of interrelate. So it's not just about the well-being, but there's also something that's happening around relationships and around learning and around empowerment at the same time. So it's a fantastic example in that respect.
And I think also it's like the power of the diamond model is that when something happened, like none of us expected the pandemic to happen, we were able to respond really quickly to that because we had those relationships and because we had those connections and that positive experience. And then we've been able to kind of, you know, tweak and develop it. But yeah, I think the diamond model is a fantastic framework.
Thanks. Brilliant. So I'm very curious to kind of open up the fishbowl now and have more of a conversation with everybody. I should also mention that we are recording this call, so if you don't want to appear in the final recording, then just switch off your camera if you want to say anything. But also otherwise we'll just be using the image of the person whoever is talking. So for now that will have just been Lois, Cara, Robin, and myself. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully you won't have any issue with that, because it'd be lovely to see you and to hear from you. So I'm just curious in terms of like what are your initial thoughts, or what kind of examples do you have that might might fit in with what we've discussed so far, might kind of highlight the diamond model or aspects of it. Anybody happy to share anything? Simon, go ahead.
Hi everyone. Not so much an elegant sort of experience that other people have presented, but I deliver with colleagues from residential fostering and early help services some social pedagogy introduction sessions as part of what we do, and we've missed that a lot because COVID has got in the way of doing that live. But when we do it with people, something we introduced about 6 months ago is using the diamond model as a way of summarizing the whole of the session that we deliver. So we present a whole range of ideas that are social pedagogy foundations, really, common third, 3Ps, reflection, etc. I've always felt that I've struggled to figure out how to pull it all together and show people that all of these things fit together as a shape around how we work and how we put it into practice. And so we lay on the floor a big sort of picture of the diamond model and get people to place words they've used during the day and ideas they've had during the day onto the diamond model. And it sort of holds it together and allows for a lot of good conversation. So for me, it is that space where I sort of glue the bits of social pedagogy together and with colleagues, and it's a really helpful part of my thinking and hopefully their thinking on that.
Right, great. Thanks, Simon. That's a lovely idea. I know what I'll be doing in the next course. Thanks. Stephen, you've unmuted yourself.
I have, yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Bahushi from Southwark Council. I work in commissioning, strategic programs manager. So I think this is really interesting. I actually read Lois's book the other day, and that's what prompted me to come to this. I just thought it just links to so many things that I've seen or done in my practice. So I'm really passionate about co-producing my work with local communities. And then, yeah, just in terms of this diamond model, I just think it relates to practically everything, because in terms of influencing anyone from an organisation or perspective, a colleague or anything, because you don't influence somebody by some kind of adversarial relationship. It has to be a positive one. You have to find the common ground, and you have to build that relationship with someone. I remember one of the most memorable meetings that I have with a colleague. So at the time I worked in Croydon and I was working in substance misuse, and I was just doing a leadership course there, and they were telling us about how different ways to remember things and like to manage meetings, for example. And one of the things was to do games, for example, some kind of game or something with your hands, like Lego or something. And I just wanted to try it out. So I had a meeting with Public Health England, a representative there from our area. It's a substance misuse. And so we went to this cafe that had games. And so that's what I did with her. And that's one of the most memorable meetings that I have. And so in terms of building a rapport with somebody who was a key stakeholder for me at the time, that's what we did. We went there, we did Connect 4, I won. Not that matters, but I did. And yeah, it was just a really good way to build that relationship with somebody who was as a key link for the council at the time. And all the other meetings that I really remember from working in Croydon were ones where I took people to somewhere like that, to Ludquest. That's what I'm saying the name of the place. And we would do some kind of just rudimentary game, but it was just a way to build that relationship. I think in they should call it the common third. Is that, I think, something similar to that?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, and so I just think it just relates to absolutely everything that you do in life, because life is formed on relationships, and if you can't get that right, then you can't really get life right. To be honest, so yeah, I thought I'd just share that.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. That's such great examples. Brilliant, Carol.
Hi, I just wanted to say that the whole diamond model reminded me of a book I read many years ago. I don't know if anyone's read it, called The Diamond Cutter. And it's a fabulous book, all about how the diamond industry works, but actually built into relationships, looking at the different facets of people. And so I think the diamond model that you're showing here is just reminded me of that, and how it's so important to look at all those different facets. And I really like Lois's example of the walking netball team, because that just connected me into so many other areas where I've seen those sorts of changes happen. And so I think it's a really great model. I just wanted to share that and share the book as well. If anybody's not read it, it's a fabulous book to read.
Fascinating, yeah. I'll make sure to add that to the book list. That's great. Thanks, Carol. Okay, anybody else who'd like to chip in? Share any of your thoughts? Fiona? Hi, just unmute yourself. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Perfect.
No, it was just, I don't know if I had emailed you across this, Gabriel, but I know I think I'd sent it to Lois. It was the idea of, I work in residential childcare, and like Cara was saying, like a lot of the information that we keep about a young person it's all behaviour, like, you know, the reasons why they're there, or you don't really get a lot of information about who the children really are as a person, or their kind of key characteristics and things. So what I had came up with as an idea during lockdown was of like a journal that obviously myself and my colleagues would do, but actually spending time with each young person, getting to know the actual person, and documenting all this, filled with pictures, filled with their hopes and like desires and dreams and things and for their lives, just rather than always being like risk assessments and behaviour management plans. It just seems to be it's all quite negative, and it's about changing that to about the positive relationships and experiences, and how we can actually focus on that and actually evidencing that. And it's obviously this what reminded me about a lot of what Cara was saying is the exact same thing. It's what we're kind of really needing more of, I would say, in residential.
Yeah, absolutely. And not
about yeah, and it's about, for me, what it would be about is it's like changing the perception of the child or the young person who we work with. It's like how we see that. And obviously I was reading, is it Malgulsi, am I saying that right? About the rich child notion, the concept, yeah. And because what I was looking at was about how, and it's so true, the way you see a child or young person totally reflects on how you behave or act, or even you're reporting on. And it's about changing that, and about actually getting to know and understanding the person or the child. Yeah.
Can I just pick up on something you said there? It's you're building the evidence, a positive kind of evidence base, and it really relates to how do we put that down in writing for me. So often I can see the diamond model being practiced, but then you read the record and it is still quite deficit focused. It's very professionalized, and it lacks the kind of often I think it lacks that kind of relational approach. And I just if we can do both the practice and the recording, then perhaps we can start changing those negative narratives that we have about children. But I think for me there's something about how are we actually recording that in a professional way, but also in a relational way.
For me, it was, in terms of recording it, kind of image I have in my head, it's about, you know, it's really for the young person to take away with them as well. It's about lasting memories, and things like achievements, what their hopes and desires are and dreams are for the future, so that's something for them to look back on. But in terms of recording it, I mean, I would just be like documenting it in a way like, today this happened, you know, using all your, I don't want to obviously talk about all the different things like common third, but that would be your 3 Ps, and common third would definitely be up there. But I would, in terms of documenting it, it'd be around the kind of head, heart and hands. Yeah, I would say that would underpin it all.
And I think there's some really good examples out there. So if you look at Hilary Cotham's Radical Help book, she's got, so in her first chapter about working with, well, even all of it, through all of it, there's some really great examples of how you can use more creative methods to develop plans. And they are a plan. So a mind map on a sheet of paper with a person you are working with is a plan. So take a picture of it and put that into, you know, you don't need anything else. You know, Frederick Laloux in his Reinventing Organisation book talks about, you know, more creative ways of recording meetings. So using video or audio recordings instead of typing up lots of minutes. And I think you're absolutely right, Robin. We've got to get more creative, because these have got to be meaningful. They've got to be meaningful to everybody. And Cara put up there about one-page profiles, and I've seen Kath's here with us today, and you know, the work that the community circles are doing and the work of one-page profiles are really, really positive. They're really positive documents. So I think it's about just daring to be really creative. You know, we talked about Ken Robinson before, didn't we? You know, sadly passing, but it's like thinking about some of, you know, creativity and imagination and having a go at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something for me about recognizing that we're part of a wider team around the child or the adult or whoever we're working with. So we're part of their lives for some time, hopefully long enough to make a positive difference, but also it's important for other professionals to kind of get a flavor of what we see in that child, or young person or family or adult, whoever it might be. And so if we don't record that, then we still end up with that kind of document that Cara was referring to earlier. So all the great practice is kind of, yeah, meaningless if we don't also manage to capture it somehow.
Oh.
Kath's just made a really good point on the chat. Kath, do you want to explain what it is? Do you mind?
I knew that was going to happen, I think, in the head. Oh, yeah, about the Slack channel.
Yep.
Yeah, so we use Slack because it's miles better than email. And it's a bit like WhatsApp for people who don't know, but there's lots more functions than WhatsApp. So you can have different channels for different threads of work, and it just really streamlines all your communication with your team. But we have a magic, so I work with community circles. So we're a charity that supports people to have more of whatever matters to them in their lives. But our partner organisation, Wellbeing Teams, support people to live well at home. But we have a Magic Moments channel, which is just whatever magic moment you've had. So whether it's you personally or somebody that you've supported. So some of the examples are Fred, who's been supported to go and put a bet on, because that's one of the things that matters to him the most. So it's a photograph of him with his winnings that might be a couple of quid, but he's delighted. Or the first time that, you know, Joan's been to the garden centre because she's been struggling in lockdown. So it's, you know, buying a bunch of flowers. Or it just might be that, you know, you've turned, I'm trying to think now, you know, you've turned up at Keith's house and he's already opened the tin of paint and he's cracked on with doing his garden fence that you said you'd help him with that. And it's just thinking, so in home care, often people work on their own with the person. So it's just trying, one of the ways of sharing the good stuff that's happening across the team, you know, or sharing a quote from somebody, you know, you've brightened up my morning, that you know, you visited me today, and I'm, you know, whatever it might be, but it's just a really good way of the stuff that, I guess, the purpose of what we do to support people to live well. It's not the risk management strategies, it's not the paperwork, it's not the CQC regulations, it's just the good stuff.
That's great. And I think it recognizes that some of the moments might not seem big, but you can still find some magic in them. And it's worth celebrating those little moments as well, and not just the big achievements where somebody gets a certificate or a medal or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes we have a saying that, you know, it could be something that's as shallow as a teaspoon or something that's huge. But there's the moments, and it's not necessarily what you recognise as a magic moment, but what the person recognises as their magic moment, because everybody, it's just really, you know, for me, the perfect fried egg, you know, matters to me. It might not matter to somebody else, but it's that stuff.
Yeah, brilliant.
Just, can I just add into that, because it is about the little things, and when we're focused on problems, we don't see the little things that are really significant, but they, you know, your perfect Friday, for example, is a really important thing in a family or in an individual's life. So how do we see those little things? How do they also then, you know, how do we record that in a positive way? And part of my current thinking has been influenced by watching Lem Sissay. There was a program called Imagine where he looked back at his life. He was in care as a child, and all the recording was horrendously negative. So this child had, very bright child, was very negatively characterized throughout his time in care, and it just, there were no little moments of happiness, little moments that made a true picture of this young man. And that's something that really we ought to be addressing. He was in care 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but actually, have we really got very far with that? And there are lots of things that we can do. So I think that's the thing for me. If we're going to see the diamond, we need to be able to reflect that back to others as well, so that they see it too.
And I think, is it the work up in Scotland with Danny Henderson? Is it Care Visions? I think they're taking a really interesting approach to case recordings, in that they are writing letters. So what you are, so if you've got, because we have to document stuff. There are certain things we have to do. But if you've got to document something, then you are writing it to the young person or the adult or the family that you are working with. You are not doing it to meet a standard or for supervision or for your manager to approve your outcomes. What you're doing is you are writing it as if they are stood in front of you, and then they can read them. And then that's the other thing that I think, being a social worker from a leaving care team, the amount of young people that wanted access to their records and the palaver and the red tape they'd have to go through because things had to be redacted, things had to be removed. And then when they actually got it, and like you say, Lem Sissay is a good example, they read it and then they hear what was written about them. It's soul destroying. And so it is thinking about that. And I think even just changing your focus of who you're writing your notes to can be quite powerful. So, and I think that they're doing some really interesting work up there on that. And it takes time, and some staff need support in changing that focus and thinking about how they're writing.
I wonder if I could come in on that, Lois. I work up in Scotland, as I'm sure you can hear from my accent, and I've got an early years background. And one of the sort of techniques we use for recording in early years with the young children is that every child has their own book or profile or folder, and they're kept in the playroom in a way that's accessible for the children. So from the age of 3, we're actually helping children to see the good in themselves and in what they do and in those tiny little moments. And they can go and take a camera, take a photo, or they can go and get the iPad and send an email to mum, or they can ask the staff to print the photo out so they can put it in their folder. So there's a noticeable level of empowerment there, in that the children are building up their own record. But what we would sort of help them to learn to do is bring it to us or bring it to a friend. So that's the relationship aspect, and show it and share it. And sometimes the staff would write in a wee comment back to the child and say, this is what I'm writing back to you about what you've said or what you've done. So those positive experiences that children were having were right at the centre of their nursery life, but we were helping them to look for them. And so it's a bit to do with the pathways in the brain, isn't it? That they start to know how to look for the positive. And so things that we might not have realised were a big event where they'd finally made a sandcastle that didn't fall down. You know, they knew, I need to go and share this with somebody. I need to get a camera, or I need somebody to come and write this, or I need to tell somebody about it, and the folder would come out and it would all get documented. And I just think that fits that diamond model perfectly, because the children led that, and as I say, it develops those pathways in the brain.
But also it's also teaching them. It's holistic learning, isn't it? So you tell somebody and somebody responds back to you, and so it's that reciprocity, it's that relationship building. So it works on lots and lots of different levels, and I think the diamond model is great.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely, and if you're used to people seeing the good in you, then you look for that in other people as well, not just in yourself. I think there's that aspect as well, where in social pedagogy we're always concerned about, what do we do that kind of reflects what we want to see happen in society more widely, and how can we make sure that children grow up feeling like they're part of an active, vibrant community and society, that they have a contribution to make. So that's a lovely example. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it also shows, all these examples show that even though we might live still within structures that haven't necessarily changed all that much over the last 30, 40 years or so, and I think Ken Robinson highlights very much kind of what the educational structures still are and how much they're rooted in an industrial thinking that dates back to like the 1850s. Nonetheless, I think what your examples seem to show to me is that we can still work creatively within those structures to make sure that we're not held back by those structures necessarily, and at the same time we need to do something to make sure that these kinds of examples aren't just isolated incidents of excellent practice, but that they are the mainstream. Stephen, I'll just give you the next word, and then we'll need to kind of wrap things up.
Sorry, yeah, I have just seen the time. I'll try and be quick. So yeah, I was just thinking about safeguarding it in adults, and safeguarding generally, and how we approach this. And I remember a case of where I was working before, and the way that the safeguarding, the investigation about this vulnerable person, the way that they went about it was that it was against another person, and they were investigating that person, and it was just a really adversarial relationship that they started off, and that then closes the borders, doesn't it? It shuts people out. And yes, there's that thing that this person is accused of doing X, Y, Z, and you've got to then support the vulnerable person. And as your role as the social worker, your focus is that person. But then by creating that relationship, you're not going to get the best out of the situation, because that other person that you're investigating isn't going to want to talk to you, and isn't going to want to understand your point of view, because they think that you're not on their side, or you're not. Do you know what I mean? So I think even in those kinds of situations, that you need to approach things in a way of being able to influence people, regardless of whether or not they're the ones you're directly supporting or not. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I think it's a very good point, because it comes back to that, we as individuals, we still have these two wolves inside of us, and we don't always choose to express kindness in every situation. And so when it comes to kind of looking at what can we do to kind of repair and use a restorative approach, and how can we make sure that we deal with those situations, it's a lot more challenging.
And just a quick point on this, very, very quickly. All the research, whether it's safeguarding with children and families or with adults, shows that if you focus on relationships and well-being and happiness, you then support people to learn to manage risk. So instead of becoming risk averse, we need to help people become risk competent and become empowered to be able to take control of making decisions in their lives. So I think the diamond model is a really clear kind of framework to get you to think about adult or children's safeguarding, and thinking about what are we doing, how can we support people's relationships well-being and happiness, so that then they can, you can have those, like you say, discussions and focus on, safeguarding. There's a key piece of research from Sophie Hallett at Cardiff University around sexual exploitation of children, and they're very clearly saying that the social workers weren't building up relationships, they weren't looking at wider relationships. So therefore, as soon as that's missed, then they're going to go back to the things that they know. So again, I think the diamond model is really helpful when we think about safeguarding in lots of different ways.
Thanks. So given that it is 11 o'clock and I don't want to keep people much longer, I've just posted, can you just briefly write down any key learning points for you from this webinar on the diamond model? Because what we want to do throughout the entire webinar series is basically try and recreate a visual like the one that you can see here in the background. That was done a couple of years ago, so it is a little bit dated and it focuses on just 4 concepts, and hopefully over time we can kind of draw out what's important around the many different concepts we have in social pedagogy, and try to synthesize that. So whilst you are doing this, I will just try and jump to the final slide if I can. I'll just have to whiz through my presentation, because there are more opportunities, of course, to learn about the diamond model and all things related to it. So Ali Gardner and myself will be running an 18 hours experiential online course. That's 6 sessions of 3 hours, starting at the end of September, on developing relationship-centered practice, which is an opportunity to really dive a lot deeper into the diamond model and the different areas. I think the other thing that's worth highlighting as well in terms of further learning resources is Julia Unwin's report on kindness, emotions, and human relationships within public policy, because she makes an excellent case for a relational approach to public policy and the importance of kindness within that. There's also an excellent blog by Mike Crowther from Empowerment in Blackpool, who is the CEO there, about the diamond model and how he's used that, which you can find on the SPPA website. Again, I'll send the link, and if you want to kind of go a bit more into the theory behind the diamond model, I think it'll be interesting for you to look at Martha Nussbaum's and Amartya Sen's work on the capabilities approach, which is also mentioned in Hilary Cottam's book Radical Help, as an approach that I think really works very well with the diamond model and kind of encapsulates the same idea really about looking for what people have to offer and how we can build around that to enable them to live lives that are fulfilling and that are meaningful, both to themselves but also to wider society in that sense. So I would like to particularly thank Lois and Cara and Robin for joining the Fishbowl and sharing their examples, but also would like to thank all of you for joining and contributing to the discussion. It's been really fantastic. I've really enjoyed it, so I hope you have too. And I hope I'll see you again for the next webinar at the end of September on the 3 Ps. So I'll send out more details about that. And Robin, did you want to say anything about the SPA gathering?
Yes, we have one planned for the 4th of September, Friday, I think, at 10 o'clock as usual. And we're hoping that we might focus this one on Ken Robinson, who has sadly passed, but has a great legacy for us to all take forward. So please do join us for that. And we'll have information up on the website shortly.
Great. Thanks very much. Good to see you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.